It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this very, very interesting lecture from one of India's most important voices on the future of his country, Dr. Ramachandra Guha. So I'm very much looking forward to this talk, and I want to start by thanking IDRC and David Malone for making all of this possible, and also the Canada-India Foundation for helping us out with this. So this is the 40th anniversary of the founding of IDRC, which most of you will know as a great partner for universities and researchers working in the area of international development. UBC has had an excellent relationship with IDRC for many years, with one of our strongest connections being very personal. The founding director of the Liu Institute, the late Dr. Ivan Head, was president of IDRC from 1978 to 1991. And during this period, this long period, he set a very high standard of innovation and excellence in supporting scholars and institutions in the Global South to carry out research that they had determined was important to their region. And I should add, coincidentally, that this lecture, because it turned out to be even more popular than we thought it was going to be held at the Liu Institute. We desperately exceeded the capacity of the Liu Institute, so we've moved it to our Asian Center, and thank you all for noticing that we've moved it and showing up here. Now, because of the international portfolio, and actually because of research, a large part of my job involves traveling to India and trying to understand that country, which has, from repeated visits, become actually my favorite part of the world, I'll confess to all of you. And it's one of the places overseas that I spend most of my time, along with China, the sort of two large countries that those of us in the West try to understand. Now, everybody knows the standard stuff about India, the emerging economic powerhouse and the back office of the world and the land of many religions. But what I love about India is that it's the land of argument. It's a country of enormous cultural diversity, which those of us who aren't as familiar with India don't recognize until you're immersed in India and see how much diversity there is. It's a place that somehow functions in its own idiosyncratic way, in spite of what to outsiders appears to be overwhelming chaos. And I think I always sum up the difference between India and China in the following way, and it's unfair, but I'll say it anyways. In China, you always have to work very hard to get somebody to disagree with you, even if they do. Whereas in India, the challenge is to get them to agree with you, even if they do. So we're going to hear a lot about India, and with much greater clarity than I can tell you about India. But India is a land of great challenge and of contradiction. It's simultaneously a land of rapid economic growth and great wealth, but a third of the population lives on less than $1 a day. And interestingly enough, the World Bank has an even lower standard of poverty, because according to the World Bank, only a quarter of the population lives below the poverty line. So I'm interested in their definition of poverty. It's a country where there are the most exclusive and elite educational institutions in the world, like the IITs, and yet it's also a country where 55% of women are illiterate in, well, that's a 2004 statistic. And it's a country of communal violence, and we've seen that in unfortunate incidents in the past, and yet it's also a country where religions do live and work together quite happily most of the time. So UBC is very interested in India, it's fair to say. We have strong connections with India. It will feature prominently in our international strategy that we're developing, which is part of the Place and Promise strategy. I was in India actually very recently for 2 weeks in February. I'll be back there in the fall. Stephen Toop, the president, will be in India in a few weeks' time actually. And a strategy for India has to involve developing serious partnerships with India, strategic partnerships with India, long-lasting and sustainable partnerships, and not simply sending delegation after delegation to consume the time of Indian government officials. I say this because I was following a small group of 140 people from Quebec, and my friends in the Indian government were all commenting on what just happened to them. So we're committed to that at UBC. We're very interested, I personally, and I think the size of the audience indicates that we more generally are very interested in learning more about India. And to introduce our speaker, who is now going to tell us about this wonderful country and issue some warnings about this wonderful country, I'd like to introduce, briefly I was told, David Malone. And David I first met in India, I believe, at the High Commission in India, actually at his house, the High Commissioner's residence. And David is another great fan of India, great lover of India. He is currently president of the International Development Research Center, IDRC. And as I said, he was Canada's High Commissioner to India immediately before that. And then he told me not to say anything else except that amongst his degrees is a degree from American University of Cairo in Arabic Studies. And he has, of course, many other degrees. David.
Ramachandra Guha very kindly agreed to help IDRC celebrate our 40th anniversary because we've actually been active that long. Contrary to what you might think from our name, we're not a think tank. We merely fund development research, overwhelmingly in the developing world. And for that reason, in an anniversary year, we wanted to bring one or two very thoughtful people from the developing world to engage Canadians across the country. I'm very proud to say we have a terrific governor of IDRC from our board of directors, from UBC, Frida Granot, who is with us today, who is a great scholar and also a great leader in the academic world and who contributes enormously to IDRC's governance. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, everybody everywhere in the world was fascinated with Korea and the Southeast Asian tigers. And everybody was studying them. What lessons could be learned from Korea and Southeast Asia that could be applied elsewhere? The answer was not a lot, but they were the flavor of the month. Today, a number of countries we think of as emerging economic powers, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, some others, are attracting all of the attention. And there's a burst of enthusiasm for them, which is both entirely commendable, but also requires qualification. And I think Ram will present us with some views on how our enthusiasm for India might be qualified. I adored my time in India unreservedly, and yet I'm occasionally a critic of some of the individuals and things that go on in India. Ramachandra Guha reminded me the other day that he is entirely the product of an Indian education. We're so used to hearing of Indians who have studied all over the world. He studied in the best institutions in India, St. Stephen's College in Delhi, then the Delhi School of Economics, which was experiencing its golden age when he was a student, and finally one of India's great IITs, which he graduated from with a doctorate in sociology, but it also covered aspects of ecology. He went on to write extensively on all sorts of different topics until his great recent work, India After Gandhi. He was probably best known amongst Indians for his writing on subjects like cricket, but his book, India After Gandhi, a unique masterpiece, is unputdownable for anybody with any interest at all in other parts of the world. It managed to translate, for those of us who didn't know India well enough, the excitement of its post-independence years, and then in a second part of the book explored a number of issues which are extremely relevant and challenging to India today. And perhaps he'll touch on some of those in his talk. Ram, it's a great privilege to introduce you, and I don't want to stand between the audience and you any longer. Thank you very much.